the moral of the story is here. Put shitloads of marine grease on everything, because if you're going to be putting it in the ocean, that's what's going to happen. So what took me 2 days last week, or 2.5 days to get right, I've done in 2 hours. These 4 are perfect. Got the old girl interim in for a few repairs. It's actually not the boat, it's the brakes. We want to go away for the weekend, and it's about a 6-hour drive, and the brakes are all seized up. So I bought these brand new Trojan calipers on eBay. They're pretty cheap. I've got to get a few barnacles off the bottom too, so while I'm here I may as well touch up some anti-foul and get her back on the water. She's desperate. Oh dear, what a mess. We went to take the brake caliper off here, and the bolt on the sliders that adjusts the tension or holds the caliper in place has sheared off in the plate in the back of the axle. Now, luckily it's a dual trailer, so the worst case is I can take the axle out and drill out the stud that's still remaining in the metal plate behind the hub there, because I can't get it off as a result. But yeah, what I've done is I've actually hacked away at the caliper, cut the caliper in half to get it off. I do have a new set of calipers, so I would have come up with a better solution had I not, but I'm trying to get the thing back on the water as quick as possible. It's been sat here for a few weeks and I'm over it. I want to get out and go sailing. So yeah, brakes, how much fun is that? Alright, now that I've removed it, you can see the problem. These sliders don't slide anymore, so there's no way that the brake's going to adjust. And what had happened was it had locked on to the rotor here. Now, if this was a car, you'd throw this away and put new rotors, or you'd have a machine, but on a trail, I'm not that worried about that. What I've done is I bought all new calipers to replace these, and this old spring arrangement, just ridiculous. So the other thing too is I've noticed is that the brake cable is plastic coated and encased. I'm not convinced that's a great idea, because what's happened is it's rusted in here, and on the other side over there, you can see it on the ground there, it had actually frayed, so it was going to give anyway. Time for a total rebuild, get these new bolts, put everything new on it, and then it'll be reliable for hopefully another 10 years, but provided I keep the maintenance up to it. So it quickly became apparent I needed to remove the axle, got it out, and that bolt was seriously seized inside that hole. So I thought I'll square off the end of it and see if I can get it with a spanner or a wrench, and there was no way that was going to happen either. So it created a hell of a problem for me, and the problem is that you can't actually put the caliper on without the bolt being able to screw in. So I needed to then drill out, and yeah, it just caused no end of problems. So this is how I went about it, and certainly got it fixed, but it took a while. So it's been just a freaking drama, and I've spent way too much time on it. But now the problem with that, the bolt was seized in place. I drilled it out with an easy out drill, still seized, so it must have been welded in. So I then drilled the other hole here that holds the brake caliper on, grabbed an oversized drill, unfortunately, out of the tap and die set, because I was going to tap another thread here. Yep, guess what? Then I thought I'll put a healer coil in to there, into the hole that was there, and guess what? There's no such thing as a 14mm drill bit that fits the friggin' healer coil, or it's about 50 bucks. So I'm now grinding another piece of steel. I'm going to clean this up, retap, weld that on, then I'll retap it, and then I've got basically back to square one, and I'll retap it at the correct thickness. Righto, so that wasn't that hard. after all that. I'm just going to give it a bit of a grind, give it a bit of a clean up, and then I'm going to re-tap another hole here and fix my calipers back on. I guess the moral of the story is here. Put shitloads of marine grease on everything, because if you're going to be putting it in the ocean, that's what's going to happen. So I'd never service the brakes on this. I'm glad I didn't do any long trips. I mean, I was only driving around the local area here, but holy God. So what I've done is, for $120 I was able to get 2 complete new sets of calipers. That included the brake pads, and for another $40 odd I found a stainless cable about 10 metres long that actually fit it with all the clamps and everything. So I was able to repair the entire brake system for about $160. Look, probably could have done it a bit cheaper, but ultimately it solved the problem, and it took about 4 or 5 hours to nail it, and it's as good as new. Now, while I had the boat out there, I thought I'll give it a polish, so I broke out some cutting cream and gave it a really good buff. It came up beautiful. I mean, this boat's 40 years old, so ultimately it just shows you how long these boats last, and essentially it was time to get back to the Cat, and I'll do the anti-fouling and deal with the other things I need to fix on the boat later on. But you'll remember last week I was dealing with the thought of engine bay modifications, and this is where I'm going to go right now. Righto guys, on Saturday, it's now Monday morning, I came in here and cut my 30mm by 880 long, 30mm thick H80 foam and laminated 5 sheets together with epoxy resin. So I've just come in, I've let it sit for around 48 hours, so I'm going to remove all of this. Had a big day paddling yesterday, so thought I'd better come in and do some work here. But you notice I put a lot of pressure on it. There's no need to vacuum bag this, because there's no voids in this foam other than the small perforations to allow for the resin to sort of impart themselves up inside those holes. So what I've done is put some weight on it. Remember to put some plastic over the top. You can see that the resin's actually come right through the holes here, laminated together. Wow, that is, you can see here the penetration, and that is the only void in these foam blocks, so there's no other voids. You can see here that this is now one solid block. It is never coming apart. I fail to see how there's no way that's coming apart. So the idea is that this is going to be a vertical engine bearer carrier, and this will have to be shaped to the shape of the skeg and then mounted on the skeg of the boat, and then flattened, and then the engine bearer, timber engine bearer, will actually then be mounted or glassed to the top of that. So this will be glassed in place first, and then the engine bearer glassed to the top of that, for which I can then mount my engines. As I said earlier, and as you've seen with my skeg, it is a very odd shape, and it needs to bear the weight of the entire engine on both feet within the V of that skeg. It's a very unusual shape, and it needs to be dealt with correctly. So once again, you can see the penetration through these perforations. That's gone off perfectly. It's actually kicked off. It was a bit cool last night. We've actually gone from being record heat to nice cool temperatures. So we're getting down around about 8-10 degrees at night, 20 degrees through the day. So it's almost optimum for curing, provided you get to kick off while it's around 16 to 20 degrees. It's okay. Any cooler, it won't kick properly. But we've had a good day, and I'm now ready to start shaping. Okay, so I thought it might be important to explain what's going on here. This is going to be the engine bay beds for the engine bearers to sit on. The foam I've laminated is actually going to sit here. Now, to derive this shape, it's taken me all morning to work this out, but I've had to use a flexible form gauge to derive this shape of this chine here, and I've transferred that with a dead vertical extension on it onto some templates here, and as you can see here, I've actually made essentially a strong back form, or a sectioned or a stationed form of the actual section I need to to grind or shape out. The only issue with that is I have a massive solid piece of foam that needs to be, essentially needs to be exactly shaped to that region so that it's sitting down on that chine there. So I got Johnny's drop saw here. We were trying my bandsaw and I think we've blown it up, haven't we, mate? The issue is going to be getting those shaped forms on the end, as long as they're straight.
That's right. I'll just get a bit of
maybe
timber.
wedge it in the back or something to square it up.
Pencil there. I think we can reverse it and cut the other way.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Spin it around.
Yeah. That's all right, that'll be enough.
It's going to be whatever we do anyway.
Yeah, that's all right. So I've killed my bandsaw, I think. Another victim, John.
Well, mate, not all machines last.
Especially that one. That one's had a pretty tough life.
Sometimes you just got to do things the manual way, son.
And the one thing to remember with this foam is you get a lot of friction, so of course
It's hard to cut.
It is hard to cut.
It's not like timber.
Well, you're not removing the material
No,
either.
it's getting clogged.
There we go. Beautiful. Now we've got our sections, we can go and shape.
Cut some blocks.
Righto, let's go.
Be a sculptor.
Thank you, mate. Fantastic. We've just spent a good hour or so. We've decided that we're going to do it in 20 centimetre sections, around about, I guess you'd call that 8 inches. And I've been down to Johnny's and used his drop saw because my bandsaw carved it. And I've come up with this. I now have 4 sections, of which each section will now be shaved out, and all I'll have to do that is transfer that form and the first form onto here, which will be this one, which is hot glued on at the moment. So that'll get hot glued in place, it'll get glued on there, and then I've got my shape, and then I can grind down one section at a time, and rather than freehand forming it, because that would obviously lead to voids, and I don't want any voids. I want this to be almost perfect fitting, and then I'll glue these back together in the correct manner, and ultimately end up with a bed that is going to be self-supporting to support my engine bearer. So very important that gets done. So once again, I'm going to do 4 individual sections, all of them shaped to the template. And then just like working in reverse when you're designing a kayak or designing a surfboard, working with form gauges or working with patterns and stationed patterns, and ultimately I'm going to get down to the shape I need. So the important thing is you have your sections numbered, and we've also cut them accordingly so that they will line up again. We cut them as straight as we could, but yeah, my bandsaw did not like cutting it, which is unreal. It's all right with 2 or 3 sheets, but 5 sheets of foam is a lot of friction. It's not removing the material like it does with wood. It just doesn't get rid of it. It tends to stay in there and gum up the saw. Right, so this is the forward end of my engine bearer blocking. And what I'll do is just align this face to here, work out the height. I'm going to leave myself with about 2 centimetres at the top here to just give myself room. I give myself room to be able to shave it back to a dead level once I before I glass it all in place. And then I've got to remove all of this foam. So I'm going to hot glue that guy to there. That's now giving me my perfect shape. Same deal. Now I've got to put one on the other side here, which is this one here. sure everything stays square. Yeah, and this is station number 2, and that'll go there. And then this butts up to number 2. So that has to be removed. I'm actually going to just put a couple of dollops of hot glue here so it stays here while I'm grinding it away, but I want to be able to remove this because I'm going to be able to use this by the look of it in about 3 other places. Ultimately the veneer is going to get torn off this piece of rubbish, but it is going to work a treat. But you can see what I've got to do now. I'm going to shape that back to that, and there's an easy way to do that. Get a saw and start cutting it first before you start grinding. I found that you know, short of using a CNC, which I don't have access to, I'm just going to call this foam-aided design because there's no other way really. So just have a bit of a hack so you get away with all the material out of the way, and then you're ready to start sculpting. Chainsaw would have been useful, but the problem with a chainsaw is the oil. You don't want any oil touching this foam. It would be a major issue. So here we go. And I've laminated those 5 sheets of foam together. We've cut them into 40 centimetre, or actually 20 centimetre blocks, but now I've joined it back into 40 centimetre blocks. I think that's the future going forward. It'll save me a lot of shaping, a lot of going back and forth. But I've been able to get this shape, which is the exact shape for the engine bay bearers. Right, so these are going to be glassed in. I've got to basically fair these back. Now you can't have any sharp points, you need a fair fillet, so it's better to have a 45 degree or a sort of a 1-to-1 ratio blend back here, but they're going to be blended back in. I do need to sit the engine bay over the top of it and work out the shape because it has to integrate with that. It's been a bit of a battle, but the great thing is it's going to fit absolutely perfectly. I've just set the engine bay over the top, and now I'm going to work on this side, on the inboard side, on the port side, and make sure that I get the reverse. So there's a way of doing that. Luckily, this is the same profile as this. So the inboard side is the same profile as the outboard side. So I'm going to work on doing that right now. Okay, so I'm about to bond these in. I've just stuck some small foam blocks under them to take the weight. Obviously I don't want them to drop after I put the adhesive on, but they're perfectly in place. They're exactly where I need them to be. What I do have to do though is in the middle here there's a little bit too much adhesive going to be in between there, so I'm just going to shim this off with my bandsaw and get it to the same angle so there's virtually no gap in between these 2 blocks, and then I'm done, ready to go. I have been going at these engine bay mounts for way too long, a couple of days, but I've got them. They're pretty much perfectly shaped, ready to glue on. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to transfer that over to the other side because I need it on the starboard side as well. The time's come now because this distance here in between these 2 is way closer than that engine bay. I now have to get in there and cut a slice up each side of where I've already cut it out and allow it, relieve it so that it'll flap in when I sit this engine bay in place, because ultimately I want that to hold firstly I want it to hold the engine, but secondly I want it to position the engine bay perfectly in place. Now I've got these distances pretty much at centre, and the important thing that I get right now is that I get this flat without destroying the module, because I don't want to have to knock out another one of them. I will if I have to, but I don't want to. Right, so I've just been inside and I've worked out I've got to relieve it here. So at that corner there, I've got to cut it straight up to the top there. And in fact, I'm going to have to cut right across to the top. So this is going to be a large flap that's going to flap inwards to accommodate those foam blocks. Just going to slide it in place and hopefully it's going to fit. Can't guarantee it and don't think it will, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Alright, here we go. Oh, it's close. So close. It's probably about this much too long to make it fit. Okay, well, that sort of worked. Sort of worked. I'm now going to get it off, but it's definitely it's in there. It's pretty much where it has to fit. It's actually got to go a bit lower. I'd almost call that a success. So as you can see, I've got a lot of work to do around here to get this all to fit properly. Having relieved it there, I wish I'd relieved it further along, but that's not really an issue. I can always repair that. What I tend to do is, once I get this all shaped correctly, is glass this back to this foam. Once this is glassed in, so obviously there's going to be more glass on here as well. But glass this foam onto the boat, then glass this to that wooden engine bear on the top here, and glass the whole thing back to probably here, so it's all nice and neat and all looking like one piece. But if you look here, that is now to the point where I reckon that it can handle the weight of an engine on it. And you know, that's going to work. Brilliant. There's absolutely no movement in that whatsoever. Now I know a lot of you are thinking, why didn't I just make a shape and then pour 2-part foam into it? The issue I have with that is there's a bit of there may be some ambiguity with which to what weight capacity that foam holds, and I didn't actually research that because I'm used to shaping foam. I think this is a good method. I'm using designated scantlings to complete the job. So if you've liked my video, please give it a like, subscribe away guys, and please share it out. If you can put it out on Facebook and share it, I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time on Life on the Hulls.